Today we're talking about nutrition. Yesterday you watched the video from the TED Talk in New Zealand. Hopefully you found that as interesting as I did and as compelling in terms of mental health effects of just general nutrition. Today we're going to talk about vitamins and nutrition. I'll give you my little rant and so a couple of interesting things. Maybe more than two interesting things. Right. So we've made a distinction between what we think of as basic nutrients versus what we think of medicinal effects of herbs in our culture. So we have this idea of these are basic nutrients. In other words, basic nutrients are things that you need to live. You can't live without them. Things beyond the basic nutrients are things that are nice to have, maybe even life-changing, but you can survive without them. You may not love your survival, but it is survival. So you can think of nutrition as basic and medicinal action as beyond the basics, but herbalism would also suggest that medicinal action is nutritional. In other words, you are taking in some of these nutrients, some of these medicinal herbs. All of that is providing nutrition to your body. And so we in our culture make this distinction between a vitamin and, say, a polyphenol. And we say the vitamin is nutrition. The polyphenol has this effect on the body. Herbalism doesn't really make that distinction as much. We just talk about it as nutrition, nutrients. Your body needs these nutrients, and these nutrients help you. We don't call medicinal action non-nutrients because it's just not basic. Okay, so also I like to think of nutrients as existing in a constellation. In other words, when you eat an orange, we think of orange, vitamin C, yay, that's what it is. But the orange itself contains a lot of things that are not vitamin C. However, they're important for your body to be able to take in all that vitamin C. For the vitamin C to be bioavailable, it needs a number of other nutrients. And so you absorb vitamin C by itself, but maybe not as well as with other things. Just like you absorb iron by itself, but not nearly as well without a lot of other things, one of which is actually vitamin C. And so I like to think of it as a constellation. Each nutrient is a constellation, or each vitamin is a constellation, not just by itself. Although in our day, what we do is we find nutrients by themselves in the drugstore. So you can go buy vitamin D, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin K. You can buy them all by themselves in the drugstore, taken out of their package of food. So in the real world, vitamins and minerals come prepackaged in food with the things that you need to absorb them that are right there in that prepackaged food. It seems like it would be easy, right? However, what we like to do is destroy our food so that it doesn't have nutrients, or just eat sugar, have terrible diets, and avoid vegetables and fruits. So we'd like to avoid the packages where the vitamins and minerals come and not eat those because we don't like the way they taste. But seriously, have you had a lot of frozen vegetables? There's reasons we don't like the taste. Those don't taste like actual vegetables. So when I sometimes have them, I think, well, what did they do to the vegetables so they taste horrible? Because if you have them fresh, they taste or can taste fantastic. When you process them, they're not so good. And you have to add all this other stuff to make them taste better. And then people just prefer not to have them and think that, well, I'll just go to the drugstore and pick up a lot of these bottles of vitamins that are out of the package per se. So when you take the vitamin C out of the plant and you eat it separately, it's sort of like the same thing as when we're looking at herbs and we take the active part out of the herb and we think that we have taken out everything that makes the herb useful. Oh, we got the active, that's it. The rest of the stuff, filler, just inert, doesn't do anything. And I disagree. Many herbalists will disagree. People who understand anything about how plants work should disagree. People who are very stuck in the kind of Western medical thinking, but they want to use herbs, they will still see herbs in that same philosophy as Western medical thinking. And so they'll still use that idea of actives, and here are the nutrients that are important, and then the rest of the plant filler. So I obviously disagree with that. I see a lot of value in the whole of the plant. So this is like my rant here. I think it is just absolute hubris to think God made plants as like a carrier for one nutrient, and that the rest of the thing is ineffective. I think God is a lot more efficient than that, and complex. And if we look at complexity as a way of being, I think there are a lot of compelling reasons why a plant is a package and not just the delivery system for, say, vitamin C. So therefore, I see vitamins and minerals as constellations. They're all the things in them are necessary for that bioavailability, and not just active kind of ingredients that we can pull out and have exactly the same benefit, whether it's in the plant or outside of the plant. We actually know in terms of minerals, plant-based minerals are pretty different than, you know, what you get when you sand or grind up rocks. Your body knows the difference. Just because the chemical seems to be the same, the chemicals around it make a difference. Okay, let's talk about plant metabolism. Human metabolism, just like plants, we have a metabolism. Metabolize means that you break things down and create energy out of the thing. And so plants create energy. They create life through water, sunlight, air, soil, nutrients. And out of that, they can create all the compounds necessary for life. This is what metabolism is. So when you eat, your body has a metabolism that breaks down that food into what is necessary for you to live. There are lots of things that you can create out of your food that help your body. The things that you can't create out of your food are what we call essential nutrients. In other words, they're essential because you can't make them in your body. You have to get them from outside sources like your food. So similarly, a plant can't make sunlight, but it can make growth out of sunlight. And so all plants will synthesize what they need, the compounds that are necessary for their survival. In other words, you have no chance of living without these, are what we call primary metabolites. So protein, fat, and carbohydrates are primary metabolites. That is the primary things that all plants make to create themselves existing. They all make fat, protein, and carbohydrates. They also make vitamins and minerals, or not necessarily make them, but craft them from what they have received. So I guess that's the same thing as making them. Yeah, okay, sorry. Same thing. So if you think about primary metabolism and secondary metabolism, primary metabolism is creating the basics: fat, protein, carbs, and basic vitamins and minerals can be part of that primary metabolism. Secondary metabolites, so the result of the secondary metabolism. So a fat would be a primary metabolite. Secondary metabolites are processes from the plant that aren't critical to survival, but really, really help survival. So these are pathways that give the plant what it needs to thrive. Let's say you have a plant that is like maca. Maca grows in the top of the Andes Mountains, very, very high up, lots of wind, lots of sun. Now, how can a plant survive in that harsh environment? So it has fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And I keep saying fat first because I want you to get it that in our culture, we think of plants as completely zero fat. And that's not accurate at all. It's just that we simplify everything and we think of carbs as spaghetti and fat as this gooey, disgusting thing. And we don't really see differences between particular kinds of fat or particular kinds of carbohydrates. We've made it all so simple so that we can remember what to eat and what not to eat. I would like to turn that on its head. Anyway, so this maca that grows up in the Andes Mountains has to find a way to survive up at that altitude with these conditions of harsh sunlight and wind. And so it produces secondary metabolites. And the secondary metabolites have the job of helping the plant to thrive in that environment. Did you hear that thunder? I guess it's going to have a thunderstorm, which I love. Okay, so secondary metabolites are all the things that the plant will produce kind of in response to its environment to help that plant thrive. Now, interestingly, maca does a whole bunch of things for us. I love maca. It's a great herb. It's really used a lot for endocrine, reproductive system kind of things. It also does this thing where it can be protective from the sun. It can help protect your skin from sun damage and heal sun damage. Well, isn't that interesting that it can do that for us? And that sort of matches up with what some of the secondary metabolites in that plant are going to do to help it thrive in this very sun-intense, harsh environment. So secondary metabolites, often specific to the particular environment, the particular plants around them, the competition, all of the things that get in the way of life. Those secondary metabolites will help with attracting pollinators, plant defenses. These give us medicinal benefits. So these secondary metabolites are what we in our bodies are using to create the medicinal effect of the plant that goes beyond simple nutrition, simple fat, protein, and carbohydrates into medicinal nutrition where we have secondary metabolites. Secondary metabolites there's so many of them, around 100,000. We don't know nearly what they all do. We can divide them into three basic groups. There are terpenes, there are phenolics, and there are what we call nitrogen-containing compounds that include things like alkaloids. And so if you want to go into secondary metabolites as your career, you could pick something like alkaloids and just work on alkaloids and become an expert in that area. And that would be enough. That you would have more work than you could ever do just in alkaloids, plant alkaloids. So the possibilities here, I just want to open your mind up to what is out there that you could do. You would have to do with herbs that also if you're interested in herbs and biochemistry, you could hang out with alkaloids, etc. So both primary and secondary metabolites will act in the human body. This little review, like I said, you could, for example, carbohydrates in the body can give you energy. They can actually be anti-tumor. They could be antimicrobial. They can help lower blood sugar. Of course, not all carbohydrates help lower blood sugar. They can help lower cholesterol. These are possibilities with some carbohydrates. Secondary metabolite, one example of a secondary metabolite or group of them could be the polyphenols. And these types of chemicals tend to be antiviral. They tend to be anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic. So you can see how plants in general have some medicinal action all the time. Most green plants, and I can't really think of any that don't do this, but most green plants tend to help overall health beyond the primary metabolite, to the point to where most of them are blood thinning. So they tend to help blood be able to be transported better instead of being too thick to be transported. I think that's not a mistake. I think that we always need that help from our plants. Nutrients are classified as primary metabolites. There are 7 major classes you can think of. And so here are those 7 on screen. We're going to talk not about all of them, but about some of them. In your text that you read for yesterday, the Douillard text. This text is from a book. It's a chapter from the book called The 3-Season Diet. I love the 3-Season Diet. It's not a diet book. It's about how to eat. And so you could call it the 3-Season eating method or something. We tend to abuse the word diet these days. But his basic idea is that the body changes with the seasons. And so there are seasons in which you need more or less fat. There are seasons in which you need more or fewer carbs, etc. Plants thus will talk to your body and help your body be adjusted to that season through giving you what you need. So in the spring, what's happening is the spring happens after the winter. In the winter, you're benefiting from higher fat content, help you keep warmer, etc. Help you preserve your energy level. Once it's spring, it's time to lose that fat because you don't need it in the warm summer anymore. And so the spring is sort of a natural cleansing time to help your body lose the fat and develop more of a carbohydrate-focused diet that will help you in the summer to stay cooler. And so the spring plants are plants, if you look around at what's available in season in the spring, you'll see that these are plants that are very low in fat and that have action that helps the body with sort of this kind of spring detox idea. So the plants will have an effect on your body that helps move fat out if you're eating seasonally. We don't even know what it is to eat seasonally anymore. I mean, go to your local grocery store, everything's available all the time. There's no such thing as seasonality, really. Most vegetables are available year-round from wherever you can get them in the world, whether it's hothouse or hydroponics or from a different country where they grow them and they have a different season. We just really don't respect the idea of a season anymore. And so when I saw this book, The 3-Season Diet, that idea of eating foods in the season thereof has always been something that has absolutely fascinated me. And so I had to grab this book and see, what did this guy have to say about eating in season? And I just thought it was so thought-provoking to look at how plants assist us in being healthier based on what season we're in, and that even the microbes in and on the plants communicate with our body about the state of the earth and prepare us for what is around us. How can we thrive based on our surroundings? Microbes will share that information with our brains. We don't really think of that. And when we start eating completely sterilized foods, we have no benefit of those microbes, and that can be very problematic. Okay, vitamins. Here's vitamin basically is defined as a nutrient that is required that you cannot make on your own. And so just like your body has pieces that scientists say you can live without that, and you can live without it, your life might be a little easier with it, like an appendix or a gallbladder or your left arm. Your life would probably be easier with all those things, but yes, you can live without them. Similarly, you need vitamins. You can't really live without those, but secondary metabolites are kind of like the gallbladder and the left arm and the appendix. Your life is a lot better with secondary metabolites than without them. So this idea that maybe you could just substitute a string of vitamins for eating fruits and vegetables just makes no sense at all to me. You don't understand what's going on. When people were naming and identifying vitamins, they ran across some substances that they thought were critical and then later on found out weren't critical or could be made by the body. So that's why you have some holes in the B vitamin numbers. So B vitamins are a whole group of vitamins. Vitamin A is kind of basically one thing, not necessarily, once you get really into the complexity of it. Vitamin D is kind of one thing. Vitamin C is kind of one thing. Vitamin B, lots of different things are a B vitamin. And so some people would name like B8 or B10. Those used to be a nutrient that was thought to be a vitamin, but now is no longer considered one of the B vitamins. There's 8 B vitamins, B1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generally skipped, 6, B9, B12, maybe B5 is not skipped. Anyway, there's 8 of those. So B vitamins critical for psychological health. They're critical for your body functioning. For example, B6 helps you with sleep. B12 helps with energy and focus. But they're all critical for body functioning. And some people take things like biotin, B7, for skin health, nails, hair, that sort of a thing, because those are all useful to the body. Just because they're not considered critical vitamins, they're not one of the final 8 B vitamins that might be in your B complex, they're still useful. Speaking of getting a B complex, you want to make sure that you're eating plenty of healthy food. Remember, packages that contain all the things you need are much more helpful to the body than powders. But sometimes you do need or want to supplement, in which case I think it's critical to make sure that the company that you are getting vitamins from is a company that is doing a really good job. There are plenty of companies that will give you powder that is just crap. And so there's no point in having that. B vitamins and psychology. It's sort of a mixed evidence. And here, this is where we pull in our discussion about science and how sometimes people don't control for all the things in terms of science. Sometimes they don't construct the randomized controlled trials in ways that are useful. I think the B vitamins are critical for psychology. The evidence mostly bears that out, but there are some articles that seem like anomalies that don't find any sort of an effect when other articles do find an effect. And so you can say there's mixed evidence. You can also say the weight of the evidence does seem to indicate that B vitamins are at the very least helpful. They may not be everything, but they're at the very least helpful. And in a complex model where lots of things work together, this makes sense to me. Of course, B vitamins are not a magic bullet. That makes no sense to me. So there is mixed evidence about B12 and folate, which is B9, helping to reduce psychosis in patients with schizophrenia. And other B vitamins, B1 and B3, thiamine and niacin, also can help people with schizophrenia. How many people with schizophrenia get this information? I don't know, but I'll tell you, in the people I've treated, nobody had heard of it. I don't do a lot of treatment for people with schizophrenia. That's not really my area, but I have done some. And discussing vitamins was something that they had never heard of and thought was kind of crazy. You know, the only thing that they get is an antipsychotic. And you heard about that from yesterday's TED Talk. B9, a methylated form of B9, can result in a reduction of negative symptoms in schizophrenia. So negative symptoms are things like apathy and withdrawal and flat affect, which is kind of like I'm not really feeling or looking like I'm feeling any emotions. Methylated B9 can help reduce those symptoms. There's some evidence that B12 can improve depression and that B12 and folate, again, B9, those are associated with improved attention and concentration. There is this thing called MTHFR. That's what the word that it means. I'm not going to say that word because it will just be funny. So MTHFR apparently is less funny. I might find it's a little more funny. But what we know is that MTHFR does have an impact in terms of psychology. So a defective MTHFR gene can result in a higher risk of some psychiatric diagnoses. In other words, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, autism, ADHD are associated with the MTHFR genetic anomaly. So MTHFR is basically what they call a polymorphism of a gene. In other words, a gene that is made not quite right. And so since the gene is kind of not made right, the gene's effect is that it doesn't do its job quite right. And so this gene's job, yes, is to help methylate. Methylation is basically breaking down nutrients. You can think of it kind of in a simple way that way. And your body methylates all the time, like millions of times every day, millions and millions. And so methylating helps your body do pretty much all of the things. Now, if you have MTHFR, if you have this genetic polymorphism, there are many different ways of the gene being different than the average or the what they call the normative gene. And so they've made numbers for some of those ways. The two most popular identifiers for these polymorphisms are MTHFR 677 and MTHFR 1298. In both of these, they don't make this enzyme very well, and so your ability to methylate is compromised. It's compromised. It's not like it's not zero. It's not like you can't methylate, obviously, because then you would be dead. But it's not as good as the average person's ability to methylate. And so it depends. You may have 2 copies of this gene, in which case you're considered homozygous MTHFR. You might only have 1 copy of the gene, so you're heterozygous, or you might have 1 copy of each, the 1298 and the 677 gene that is a polymorphism. And then you're heterozygous for both, which could have its own problems. In any case, any one of those conditions results in less efficiency in methylating, which can affect your eventual health in many ways, but also your mental health. Now, you have to know this polymorphism is not causal. It doesn't mean if, like, let's say you have one of the worst options, which is homozygous for 677, and that is associated with a much higher risk of some psychological problems. This doesn't mean you will have those problems. It just means that you're at a higher risk if other parts of your body aren't also helpful. Or, this is a very complex issue. We do know that what happens when you have this gene is you don't break down your B vitamins very well. And here's where it's connected to vitamin B. You have to methylate the Bs in order to benefit from their action. And so we're focusing particularly on B12 and folate, B9. And if you don't methylate those very well, then they're not really present much in your system to do what they need to do. So you might be taking a B complex, but you want to look on the back of that bottle and see if your Bs are methylated, at which point you may have more trouble using that. That may just be kind of useless stuff in that bottle for you. Various methylated forms have been associated in sensitive people with maybe more anxiety, maybe, it just sort of is a very complex thing. Again, we're not looking at one magic bullet here, just take more B12. What we do know is reduced methylation, so this is the first quote, reduced methylation is associated with the onset of things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, autism, and ADHD. That's reduced methylation due to having one of these polymorphisms in your genes, an MTHFR polymorphism. This reduced methylation may also affect the likelihood of having this disorder. So you have more mixed results, more weight toward an impact. You also have low folates being a risk factor for schizophrenia. So you can see how this genetic defect interacts with vitamin B in particular to result in some very kind of specific psychiatric issues. Now, your best source for getting vitamins, again, is plants, whole unprocessed foods. There are a lot of people that will tell you, and I lean toward this also, that food right now is not as nutrient dense as it used to be. All of our use of fertilizers and of pesticides has created food that doesn't have the nutrients it used to. The soil doesn't have the kind of nutrients that it used to. And so you have to eat more And then a lot of times you have to supplement. And so certainly I supplement kind of judiciously, taking things that I think I really need to help me. There are plenty of B vitamins, most of the Bs, available in plant foods. B12 is not there for plant foods, but we did find there is one probiotic that we've really discovered so far that can make B12 in your gut biome. Probiotics do this. They make B12, but a lot of times they make so little it doesn't really matter. This particular probiotic, which I've written there on the bottom, Propionibacterium freudenreichii is the name of that probiotic. This will make significant amounts of B12 in your gut, enough for you to actually notice and for your body to benefit from that. So that's pretty exciting for people who want to be vegetarian or vegan, and then they're limited, hugely limited in terms of their B12 intake. If MTHFR is an issue, then you're going to want to have pre-methylated vitamin Bs. And so here we're mostly talking about B12 and B9, methylated folate, and a methylcobalamin instead of just plain cobalamin. I recommend that you don't stress about this. Usually when you eat healthily and plenty of fruits and vegetables, exercise, sunshine, sleep, all those things, you're probably pretty okay. It is possible for you to see that fixing a methylation problem might make a huge difference for you, but many people are pretty okay. Vitamin C. Vitamin C deficiencies, we all know vitamin C, immune, oranges, it's sort of across the board. We don't really talk about vitamin C and psychology. So deficiencies in vitamin C can lead you to having depressed mood, low energy, and what they've found is that when they had people hospitalized for poor mood and energy, using a supplement for vitamin C really helped them reduce those symptoms. And so you kind of want to think about if you're feeling kind of yucky, and you're thinking maybe I'm a little depressed, look at your B vitamins, look at your C vitamins, and then we'll get to D. Definitely look at your D vitamins. A deficiency in vitamin C can even, in some cases, cause neurological damage. You have to work hard to be that deficient, but there can be serious problems for C deficiency as well. It can reduce bipolar symptoms. Vitamin C can reduce those bipolar disorder symptoms. Low vitamin C is also associated with confusion and anger. And if you get high levels, that might increase your mood. You might have elevated mood. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is something that I suggest everyone takes a look at all the time. It is so easy and so inexpensive to supplement with vitamin D. And it across the board is so helpful in terms of your immune system and in terms of your mental health. So here's just one example, one article of 104 adolescents. They are presenting for acute mental health treatment. 72% had levels that were low. So your standard Western style physician wants you to have a vitamin D level of at least 30. And so if you go get your blood level and you want to get a number and they want it to be at least 30. If it's 30 or more, then they say, well, you're fine. And if it's less than 30, they'll say, well, you probably should supplement. If it's less than 20, you're considered more severely deficient. Some families have trouble with vitamin D. Some families don't make vitamin D very well. They may have a vitamin D receptor issue genetically, et cetera. And so you can get people who are out in the sunlight and still have low vitamin D levels. So here we have psychological effects in adolescents. When you think about how frequently are adolescents outside in the sun, you might see that these things make more sense. So 72% had D levels that were lower than 30. That's actually not that uncommon. A lot of people in the United States have trouble with low vitamin D, and we don't even know it. The adolescents with psychotic features in their mental illness compared to adolescents without psychotic features. Those adolescents with psychotic features had lower vitamin D levels. And so there seems to be some sort of effect of vitamin D in protecting against psychosis. Race in this study, race was associated with psychosis until they adjusted for vitamin D level, which says, we know the people with darker skin have more trouble absorbing vitamin D or making vitamin D from the sun, because melanin in the skin blocks those rays that create vitamin D. So vitamin D, the cholesterol in your body is what vitamin D is made from. And so the sun will penetrate your skin. Those UV rays penetrate your skin and transform that cholesterol essentially into vitamin D. There are a number of ways vitamin D will transform within your body to eventually be used as the vitamin D that we are looking for in the blood. But race is always associated with vitamin D because of skin color. And so the darker the skin, the harder it is to get adequate levels of vitamin D. And so when we see these effects of races with higher levels of psychosis versus lower levels, and it's not about the race here. In this study, this showed it had nothing to do with race. It was all about vitamin D. When you controlled for vitamin D levels, everyone was the same in terms of the effect of vitamin D on psychosis. Vitamin D helps suppress mood. When it's deficient, it increases your chances of depression. And when you give a supplement, it can reduce depression when you are depressed. Very, very cost effective. The side effects are like you have better immune functioning, better mental well-being, better physical well-being. These are great side effects. You may not be able to get everything you need from sunshine. So, you might think, oh, I'm just going to go out and be in the sun and that'll be great. And then I'll have all my vitamin D. And for some people that works really well. For some people, it doesn't work very well. Obesity gets in the way of you creating enough vitamin D. The latitude you live at gets in the way. Sometimes, in Virginia, it's not as much of a problem as it is farther north. I used to live in Connecticut. In Connecticut, our latitude was such that it was very, very difficult to make adequate vitamin D with the intensity of the sun where it was at in Connecticut. I want to show you this table in this article. So here's where I found the article in case you want to look it up yourself. There's this table of nutrients. Now, there's a lot of useful information here in terms of vitamins and minerals, but this last thing, the last thing on obsessive compulsive disorder at the bottom, I have to say it made me laugh a lot because a lot of times people will make fun of doctors' recommendations to take Prozac for depression by saying, depression is not a deficiency of Prozac. Right? Depression is about a deficiency of nutrients, and Prozac's not a nutrient. And so here we have in this serious journal, we have this list of mental health disorders and their alternative treatments. And so we're looking at various nutrient deficiencies in that column in the middle. I wouldn't say that was the cause. It could be one of the contributing causes because, again, complex is what we've got. And then the treatment would be, fixing that. So, for example, major depression, it could be, like you see right there, magnesium deficiency. It could be omega-3 deficiency. Schizophrenia, it could be a glycine deficiency, omega-3 deficiency again. Then this last one says obsessive compulsive disorder. It's a St. John's wort deficiency, which no, that's not how it works. It's not a St. John's wort deficiency. St. John's wort might help it. That is fine, but it's not a deficiency of a particular plant. It's like if you wake up funky, maybe you have a spinach deficiency. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So I just find it very interesting that even in a serious journal, this kind of thinking can become so extreme that you actually publish this. So summing up, vitamins B, C, and D are great for your mental health. They're actually critical to maintain good mental health. We usually focus on the non-mental health parts of these vitamins, and sometimes it's a surprise to even say these vitamins affect your mental health. They improve it, because we're used to thinking that mental health as the only things that fixes that are drugs, and even that's not too great, or therapy. But we always think, medication's better, which actually is not supported by the data. Not supported by the data. So, is your nutrition adequate? There's serious mental health benefits, and these are basic vitamins. They're essential for you. Is your nutrition adequate? And if not, what can you do to improve your nutrition? How can you take that nutrition more seriously? We will end with that and talk next about fats.